It's not just radio, it's Rockland World Radio. RocklandWorldRadio.com.
Welcome to Lighten Up, a show about bringing more love, light, and joy into your life, and archived on the Lighten Up program page. Please join us in the chat room by clicking on the chat room icon located on the left-hand side of our menu bar. Now the host of Lighten Up, Isabel Merians.
Welcome to Lighten Up with Isabel, your good news show, and today I have specially good news. I have a very special guest, my daughter, Melanie Merians. Welcome, Melanie.
Thank you, Mom. I'm delighted to be here and part of your show. I'm greatly honored to be a guest.
Well, that's very sweet. Actually, Melanie is one of those people who's brought so much love, light, and joy into my life and into the lives of hundreds of others. She is currently the CEO of the
Assistance League of Los Angeles.
And they do extraordinary work. And we'll get to that soon.
Okay.
But first, I want to share some other good news. The United Nations Development Fund informed recently that since the year 2000 until now, 700 million people have been lifted out of extreme poverty.
Yes.
Which is really remarkable.
It's remarkable. Maybe a drop in the bucket, by some count, but it's still an extraordinary feat.
It's really fabulous. That's number one. And now I'm going to talk about little things that you can apply in your own life.
Okay.
For the audience.
Yes.
I always do that. And one of the things is everyone talks about living with stress today and how stressful this is and how stressful that is. So there's some very simple things you can do to reduce stress very quickly. And they're fun things. Number one, eat a square of dark chocolate. That's about as easy as you can get and pleasant.
Yes.
Another thing is give someone a bear hug.
A bear hug. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
In other words, just the feeling of the other person.
Mm-hmm.
You're transferring energy, you're exchanging energy.
Yeah,
and that's another way. A third thing that you can do if you're really, really lucky, now I don't know if everybody can do this, but is take a swim. When you take a swim, you feel so liberated. It's such a wonderful feeling of freedom and relaxation. So if you have a pool accessible, that's a nice thing to do. And of course, I think I told my audience a while back that eating an ice cream is good for you as well. I don't know if that's from the Ice Cream Dealers of America.
Maybe.
They put that word out, or if, but they say the calcium is good for your bones, and that immediately all of your stress begins to melt. And also, we feel more childlike when we eat ice cream. It's always an association. That's always a good association. So today we're going to be talking about ways that Melanie personally has brought more love, light, and joy into people's lives.
Okay.
So when I first asked her if she'd be a guest, she said, sure. And I said, wonderful. Where would you like to start? And she said, well, at the beginning. And I said, well, do you want me to tell the audience that you were a beautiful baby and you were born in less than... And she said, no, not that far back. So I think perhaps where we'll start is when you got out of college. Melanie was always a very determined young lady, very adventurous, and very determined and desirous of seeing parts of the world that most people don't see. And so you started on your travels. Now, as a mother, that was worrisome, frankly, because she was in places that I would lose track of her for long periods of time.
Yes, well, I think, at that stage of my life, after college, I definitely wanted to see the world, and I wanted to keep moving and experience as many cultures and places and countries as I could. So, as you know, I traveled and worked here and there, to keep the money coming in, but I traveled very inexpensively, maybe $5 to $8 a day in those days through
Wow.
most of Europe and Israel and Central America, South America, the United States. And it was an extraordinary experience. And I think I was thinking about it when you asked me where would you like to start. I was thinking there was a pivotal experience that I had in my travels. So I was in South America, and I think it was Peru at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was in a marketplace, and I remember these beautiful little girls. They were Quechua. They were like native of the region in these beautiful outfits, dresses. And there were three. And one was probably around, 7 or 8, and maybe her younger sister was around 5 or 4. And then she was carrying also a baby. It was around a year old.
Wow.
And I spoke a little Spanish, and so I remember them coming up to me,
Mm-hmm.
and the oldest girl asked me if I would like to take her sister, take the baby. In other words, bring the baby back to the United States. It was obvious that I was American,
Right.
or I was certainly Western, and she thought, I'm quite certain that the child would have
a
better life.
Wow.
And I remember being so shocked that anyone, especially a small child, and of course maybe her mom or her dad had,
Suggested
encouraged
it.
it.
Yeah.
But it was so startling to me. And at that moment I thought, wow, there must be ways, to help others, to give people opportunities. And that always stayed with me. That always, really kind of stuck in my heart
Right.
as one of those turning point experiences. I was young myself. I was, I think, 20 years old at the
Right.
time. So to have that kind of experience was really startling. So
Sure.
anyway, I think as I got older and came back to the United States and started working and studying, I thought, that always kind of stayed in the back of my mind as,
Mm-hmm.
Something that motivated me to think about others and the condition of the lives of others.
Right. Well, it's certainly a powerful experience.
Yeah.
Very powerful experience. Well, I'm going to tell a little story, if you don't
Oh,
mind.
my goodness. Uh-oh. Okay. Well, I don't know if I mind or not. What's the story?
Well, I'm going to suggest that you tell it, because you can certainly do it better than I. It was your story. Is when you traveled with the Ecuadorian circus. I think that's such a wonderful story when you came to that place.
Well, there's nothing much to tell, but part of my travels, yes, I actually ended up kind of moving with a circus in Ecuador, up in the Andes for several weeks. It was called El Circo Mexicano de Fieras, which is the Mexican circus of beasts. Actually, there was nobody Mexican in the whole circus. It was all
Really?
families from Ecuador. But at that time, which is many years ago now, Mexico had a certain cachet because it was the closest to the United
America.
States. So it had, certain, certain amenities that maybe some of these countries did not at that time. So, but it was extremely enjoyable, and we would travel through these, mountainous regions and
Wow.
get to these small towns, and it would take them around a day and a half to set up the big tops. And but they had a full circus.
Wow.
And so during that day and a half of setup, they used to put a little enclosure for some of the animals, and they would have, they called it like an animal exhibit, and you'd pay like half a penny, so to speak, and the kids would come in and pet the animals. So I was in charge of taking that half a penny and showing the kids the animals, and that was my job. And that was
Wow.
probably the only thing I could have done in a circus. But
Well, I thought they wanted to train you to be a tightrope
no, I think you're hallucinating. That was not the case. No,
Okay.
that was not happening.
It wasn't that dangerous. What kind of animals did you have?
We had a tapir, which is a very gentle, big, fat animal that kind of looks like a cross between
A sloth?
like a pig, a small pig, and somewhat of a cow and somewhat of an anteater. It has a big snout, but very gentle. It just sat around and ate bananas all day. And we did have lions for a lion taming performance, and
Wow.
we had, monkeys. We had a lot of spider monkeys that would crawl all over you. So, yeah, it was fun.
But keeping a lion,
Anyway.
I mean, moving a lion around has got to be
Yeah.
a big job.
Anyway, I don't know how much light and love and joy that brought into the world, but it was certainly an experience. I'll put it that way.
I'm sure the
Yeah.
children loved it.
Yeah,
They
there you
had
go.
to.
There
They
you
had
go.
to have loved it. And the other thing that I wanted to address, and I must say that during this period of time, of course, I mean, I was very happy that Melanie was having all these extraordinary experiences, but I was concerned. And we had a sort of a plan that she was going to call once a month and reverse the charges, and once a week she'd write. And so a long period of time went by once, and we hadn't heard from her. And so, of course, we were very concerned. And that was the day that Dad called the Spanish embassy in Madrid.
Yeah,
But then I got a postal card from Melanie like a couple of days later saying, "Sorry I haven't written sooner. I was buried in a sandstorm."
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That was really pretty well. But Melanie had shown early on that that she was really concerned with others. I remember when she was 7 years old, we went skiing. My husband was an avid skier, and he wanted his children to be skiers. And Melanie had a bad fall and broke her leg. And I remember I was beside myself, and I came over to her and I said, "Sweetheart, you never have to ski again if you don't want to." And she said, "Oh, don't say that in front of Dad. It would make him feel bad." And I thought, she's in pain and she's worried about that, so I had to know you were a good person going in. But
Well, thank you, but honestly, as they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. This is the extraordinary woman of kindness, and so it's my great honor and blessing to be born to you. How great is that? Not many people can say that, so I can say it. So it's a great blessing.
Oh, that's very kind.
So anyway, on to
I really
work.
want to talk about the work that you've done.
Okay.
I'd like to start with Covenant House because that's an organization that's pretty well known. And would you talk a little bit about what they do? And
Sure. So I actually have been working, as you know, with nonprofit organizations for many years, many years. And one of my recent jobs was with an organization, Covenant House. It was actually Covenant House, California, which is the California branch. And they provide shelter and wraparound services, social services for homeless transition age youth. It's that age between 18 to 24, when kids that are, foster children or runaway kids or throwaway kids really have no place to go and they have no resources and they end up on the streets. And very tragically, many of them, as you would imagine, are extremely victimized and exploited, or many of them die. Actually, around 5,000 to 6,000 kids a year die on the streets of the United States. It's terrible. So anyway, so I was, as you know, doing fundraising, marketing, and communications for that organization. They're a wonderful organization, and I did other work before that, and I now have a new job with the Assistance League of Los Angeles.
Well, the Assistance League of Los Angeles is really interesting because you were telling me a little bit about their history.
Yeah, they have...
And before we go
please.
to that, I do want to say that as part of one of your fundraisers, I remember you sleeping out on the streets with the kids to show solidarity, and that really was a little...
That was with Covenant House, yeah.
It was Covenant House.
So with Assistance League of Los Angeles, that's an organization that has been around for nearly 100 years.
Wow.
So they started, it's actually 96 years old. And, they started, like many service organizations, very humbly and in response to a crisis. So the crisis actually had been first the earthquake in San Francisco at the turn of the last century, and then World War I, which left many young women as widows, and many children fatherless because the young men had been killed in World War I. So this group of women, it was actually a small group of society ladies who really wanted to do something and contribute to help the widows and the children have opportunities that they otherwise would not have. So they began to organize different drives and they made plans to support those in need and give provide food, clothing and supplies and books. But anyway, that was the beginning. It was just 13 women, and the original founder was a woman named Anne Banning. And then over the years, it just grew and grew, and now, really is the premier women's service organization in Los Angeles that is making an impact, to kids at this point living in poverty. So, Los Angeles is really a city of extremes.
Oh my God,
it has extraordinary wealth, and it is the #1 county in Los Angeles, the highest rate of poverty.
Really?
So it's
in other words,
tale of two cities completely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's wild.
So the number of children that are trying to survive and, really stay in school and, get an education, whatever, in Los Angeles that are impoverished, their odds are just
against them.
So against them. It's unbelievable, some of the things they face.
Wow.
So the Assistance League has many different programs, but the real focus is to kind of remove the barriers to education for these children.
Right.
So, for example, very common.
I love the story you told me about the school bus.
Yeah. So
I think
I can share a little about that.
That's really fascinating because it's very specific and it explains exactly what part of the organization does.
Right. The organization has many different groups, but one of the groups is focused on a program called Operation School Bell, and what they do is provide clothing and supplies to these kids. And, they have this huge tractor trailer, and, we go out to the school sites and organized with the school district to bring children that are living at or below the poverty line into, to have this program delivery. Right. So, they arrive and they check in and they get to choose a backpack. They set up all of these tables and all of these areas that the kids move in groups, and they choose their backpack and they put their name label on it, and then they get to go onto the tractor trailer, and it's completely outfitted with dressing rooms at either side and mirrors and all kinds of clothing stacked up, but everything is brand new. So they choose 2 tops and 2 bottoms, so slacks or shorts or a skirt or a jumper for the little girls and polo shirts, and then they get their new clothes. Usually they like to wear their new clothes off the trailer, and they put their old clothes in the backpack, and then they go from there and they get shoes. They get to choose new shoes, which is very exciting. New sneakers, bright colored sneakers. And then from there they also get 6 pair of underwear, 6 pair of socks. They also get books, they get school supplies. It's amazing. So sometimes that backpack is weighs more than they do. They're so tiny, but there's one.
But what a joy!
What a joy!
What a joy it is just to be part of that. And to see that excitement.
Oh my goodness! Exactly.
It's so fabulous.
There's so many stories. This one little boy who was a selective mute. He didn't speak. And he wouldn't speak, and so his teachers were kind of watching him, go through and get the clothing and just making sure he's okay. But by the end, when he came up, the teacher said, well, how was that? Look what you got. And he said, and he looked up, his eyes really huge. He said, this is the best day of my whole life, because now nobody can make fun of me anymore, because he used to wear his father's clothes to get to school.
Oh my God.
I know. It's amazing. Some families are so poor that they have 1 pair of shoes for 2 children or 3 children. So they each go to school a different day. One goes on Monday, one goes on Tuesday. So of course, by 2nd or 3rd grade, everyone's behind because they've missed so many days of school.
Oh, wow.
And it's so easy to, help kids. And
well, what a joyous thing.
Yeah, it's fabulous.
I think that's fantastic.
It's a fantastic program.
Talk about bringing more love, light, and joy in people's lives.
Yes.
So that is really joyous. And you also told me about something the last time you were visiting about prom night.
Oh, yeah.
Would you share that? I thought that was fabulous.
Sure. Prom night is it's a one-day event, but actually the women who are the members of the Assistance League who do all of this service work on a volunteer basis, by the way. And we serve close to 20,000 kids a year. So It's extraordinary how hard these women work and have been working for 96 years. But anyway, they prepare for months in advance. And what they do is they turn the office, the Assistance League office, into almost like a fantasy for a teenage girl. And they have different stations and same thing, dressing rooms and hair salon and makeup studio and everything. And what they do is they work once again with Los Angeles Unified School District, who identifies from the homeless division of school children, and I think most, I think 95% are from that homeless division. They identify as homeless. Seniors in high school who've maintained their grades at a certain level, and they bring in 80 or so young ladies
who are basically homeless,
but have been keeping their grades up.
That's amazing how they can even do that.
Oh my goodness. Remarkable. And anyway, so they bring them in and they schedule to come into the office, and then it's their day to shop for free, of course, for everything they would need to go to prom. Because prom is extremely expensive and is absolutely unaffordable to these young women. Completely unaffordable. So they come in and they are connected to like a personal shopper who takes them, and we have around 300 or 400 new dresses and cocktail dresses and evening gowns, and they choose a dress and whatever they want. And then from there, they choose earrings or jewelry. They choose a stole. They choose a little handbag, new shoes to match, and then they go into the makeup area and they get their hair done and their makeup, and they come in almost like so withdrawn and shy and timid, but when they leave, they're like Jennifer Lopez on Dancing with the Stars. They look fabulous, they feel beautiful, and it's so precious, it's so wonderful, because, the interviews with these young ladies, they all say the same thing. My parents could never, or my mother could never afford to allow me to go to prom. One young woman shared she lives in a garage with 8 people.
Oh my God.
And they don't have a bathroom inside. They don't have anything. And the idea of going to prom
is just amazing.
Was impossible.
Yeah.
So now she can go with a group of friends and feel beautiful, and so it's great. It's so delightful.
And how joyous is that?
How joyous is that?
So in terms of bringing love, light, and joy, the Assistance League does a fabulous job.
They do a wonderful, wonderful job.
And I remember you telling me that some of these ladies, these society ladies, are busy with the school bus and helping the kids try on shoes.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
That they're hands-on. In other words, they're not just sitting back and giving a check.
Oh, my goodness. No. They work. They work and deliver all the services. So not everyone's a society lady these days. It's much more flexible and open. We have young professionals joining. We have women of honestly, from the teenagers, there's a teenage service group as well called the Assist Teens. They do incredible work as well. Really? And then all the way up through 90 years old. Some people have been members of the Assistance League for more than 60 years.
That's incredible.
That's amazing. It's amazing.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I just thought that was just a wonderful, wonderful story.
Yeah.
And I'm so proud that you're doing this fabulous work.
It's my honor.
Yeah, and now you're the CEO, so you're running the show.
Running the show.
Which is very good news, because that gave her 10 days to come and spend with me. Being the boss is good.
It does have its advantages.
So anyhow, this is a really fun show for me, and really a great opportunity to have fun with my daughter. Getting back to good news, I want to tell you that I've been getting some wonderful response from the audience, and they've been sending me in suggestions.
Okay.
And one of the suggestions they sent, because I talk a lot about living a life in gratitude, that when you wake up in the morning, if you just take a minute and jot down some things you're grateful for, it sets you up emotionally for the day to live a life of joy and appreciation. And so one of my viewers called in that she would suggest keeping a gratitude journal. And another thought occurred to me that might be a nice thing to do, and that is keeping a fun journal. That every day, if you do one fun thing, and it doesn't have to be elaborate, but if you do one fun thing to jot that down, it's something you might share with a friend. There's so many ways of making your own life more joyous and more fun. I always say people don't have enough fun. And one of the things that I was thinking about is in doing kindness for others, you really are helping yourself. It's a greater joy for you almost than the person you're doing it for. And I think I might have mentioned on another show that Alfred Adler, who was a very brilliant psychoanalyst, once said to a patient who was depressed, if you want to feel better before you come back to me next time, do a kindness for another person, and you'll see you immediately will feel happier. And I think that's really true. I've been reading a book called Happiness. It's written by a French philosopher, and what he does is he sort of gives an overview of the concept of happiness from different philosophers' points of view, going all the way back to the earliest ones. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously we all know when we're happy, but also thinking about it on a conscious and mindful level, what is it that makes people happy? What makes us happy? It's really a very big question. I mean, it seems simple, but it really is not. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously doing a kindness for another human being, feeling, appreciated in your line of work, having someone that you have mutual love and respect for. All of these things bring us happiness, but everyone's happiness is totally different. Mm-hmm. So I would suggest that you add to your gratitude journal a happiness chapter. Think about really what it is that does make you happy, and what are your sustainable goals for the future, because we all tend to do that. Mm-hmm. A lot of people put off, rather than living in the moment, they think, well, I'm going to be happy when I get to this point, or I'm going to be happy when this happens. And then when they achieve it, it doesn't necessarily mm-hmm. make them happy. So finding the happiness in the now, mm-hmm. Whether it's in nature, whether it's being with people that you love, whatever it happens to be, but be in the moment with happiness. Mm-hmm. What's your perception of that? How would you define happiness? It's a tricky, it's a shifting kind of thing.
It's very interesting. Well, of course, as you know, I've been practicing Buddhism for 33 years now.
Wow.
Soka Gakkai, Nichiren Buddhist, SGI USA is the organization. And the fundamental premise of Buddhism is that, one can absolutely attain, as they are, a state of what's called absolute happiness as opposed to relative happiness. So Buddhism sees two kinds of happiness: relative happiness, mm-hmm. like achieving a goal or being with someone you love or whatever. And that's relative because, it can pass in a moment. Mm-hmm. And an absolute happiness or enlightenment, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
That's another term for it.
Right.
So the practice of Buddhism, which is, based on chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, enables one to activate from within their own life this condition of enlightenment or absolute happiness in the midst of or trying to deal with and transform any kind of challenge or suffering or hardship or obstacle. So it's not about the absence of those things, it's rather about, being able to manifest, a truly in your skin as you are existential, so to speak, condition of happiness mm-hmm. by challenging those things that would, impede your growth, your happiness, your development. So it's a very, mm-hmm. fascinating experience, because I've had many times in the midst of true suffering, true hell, so to speak, mm-hmm. been able to, through this practice, activate this enlightened aspect of hell mm-hmm. or suffering. So, rather than see it as something separate, like, well, there's this, greater happiness, so to speak, and then there's all these other conditions, mm-hmm. That we go through on a daily basis. Right. It's a question of really, activating the enlightened aspect or the absolute happiness from within those other conditions, because they all exist simultaneously.
Simultaneously, it's all happening
Right.
in the now.
And I think that practice, and it's definitely a practice, has enabled me to establish, a life condition that is fairly unshakable.
Which is
Because
wonderful.
as you know, as we've both been through many things and many losses and many, many challenges, to not be defeated by problems. It's not the absence of problems. It's actually the life condition to be able to face, confront, and overcome challenges and problems. That is a very dynamic experience. It's not removed and just tranquil. It's a very dynamic experience in the day-to-day, moment by moment.
Right.
So the practice of, Soka Gakkai Nichiren Buddhism has enabled me, I feel, through establishing that. And it's also helping others to do the same. So the practice is never isolated and for oneself only. It only exists through helping others
Right.
to establish their own practice, to face their own problems and overcome their own difficulties, that, one is able to fully experience, the power of this Buddhism. So it's interesting you quoted Adler, Dr. Adler. So Nichiren Daishonin, who was the first person who chanted, this phrase, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo,
Right.
he said, when you light a lamp for others, your own way is lit.
Absolutely.
And
That's
it's a
absolutely
universal
true.
truth. It's
Absolutely.
a universal truth. So,
Yeah. Well,
I've been...
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And it's certainly in keeping with your other work,
Absolutely.
so it's all of a piece.
Absolutely. And without a doubt, it is, for me, the fundamental means by which I can create peace in the world. I don't expect peace to be created because two nations sign a treaty. Treaties are always broken, unfortunately. It's really a transformation of the
Of the
human
individual
spirit
and the
that will,
individual.
enable the world to create, a respect for the dignity of all life and thereby create peace. So, through my practice of Buddhism, I feel it's also been my means, to create peace, first in my own life, with my family, with my environment. So it's, and help others do the same. So in that way, peace grows from
Absolutely.
each one of
From
us.
Each one
right?
of us, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Melly, and you've been a wonderful guest.
Oh, have I? It's been my pleasure.
I
Thank
thank
you.
you so much, and I thank my audience for joining us today. It's always wonderful when you join us at Lighten Up with Isabel. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Until next time, remember to live a more joyous life. Lighten up.
It's not just radio, it's Rockland World Radio. RocklandWorldRadio.com